magician who would do this.
Hello, everybody. How are you this Saturday evening? Kay says hi. All glad to see you. Troy, internet is spotty here at work. Terry Burke says, what's good? Hope you all are doing well. Troy says, let's see how long I can stay connected. Kay says, Evelina Pont, we're here, laugh out loud. And Kay says, where's Dolores Pierce tonight? I don't know. Maybe Dolores will be here. Terry Burke says, haha, Princeton Whigs took their award back from Fled Cruz. Fled Cruz. Oh, there's Dolores. Hey, Dolores, how you doing? Okay. So the big bill passed in the Senate, right? So part of what I want to do tonight is go over what happened. Well, I'd been wondering for a few days. When the bill came back from the House with the minimum wage provision in it, why did it not go to Bernie's committee? Or why did it not go to the Finance Committee? Seemed to me it should have gone to the Finance Committee or to the Budget Committee, and then one of those committees should have put it on the floor. So what happened? So I took a look at that. And what I found is this little piece of action here. Okay, this is an amendment. This is the first thing the Senate did formally, as a matter of the record, when the bill came back from the House, or came from the House. H.R. 1319 passed the House. And that is the relief bill. And the first thing that happened is, in order to provide for reconciliation pursuant to Title II of Senate concurrent by Resolution 5, there were a couple of things that could have been done. It could have been referred to a committee, such as the Budget Committee and the Finance Committee. And they could have referred the bill to the floor, either the House bill or an amended bill. that was amended by the committee. It could have been referred to the floor, and there could have been a floor vote on that. There could have been a floor vote on the House bill with the minimum wage in it. But instead of referring it to the committee, that line here is blank. And the bill was ordered to lie on the table and to be printed, which means it was kept in the hands of the floor manager. Who was the floor manager? Chuck Schumer. So Chuck Schumer wrote an amendment. What it says is that it was an amendment intended to be proposed by Mr. Schumer for himself, Mr. Wyden, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Brown, Mr. Peters, Mr. Cardin, Ms. Cantwell, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, and Mr. Menendez, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Carper, Mr. Leahy, and Mr. Sanders, who are the relevant chairs, of other committees that were concerned with the bill. So Bernie had a say. These people collectively consulted with Chuck Schumer, and they decided what was going to be in the amended bill. At this point, it seems to me that Bernie could have said, could have recorded his view, if he held it, that he wasn't going to vote for any bill that did not have the minimum wage provision in it. But Bernie did not take such a position. He could have taken it at that point, at the point of consultation with Mr. Schumer. He could have said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to vote for any bill that does not have the minimum wage bill in it. If you want to amend the House bill, the amendment cannot touch the minimum wage provision that came over from the House and still get my vote. He could have said, what I'd like you to do first is to put the House bill on the floor as is and get a vote on that. Because I want people on the record as for or against that particular bill, including the mini wage provision. But Bernie did not do that. The truth is, he sat still for this amendment. When we scroll down in the amendment and we look at the table of contents, we look at the labor matters, and we look at section 2101. Guess what's missing? The minimum wage provision in section 2101. That's in the House bill in section 101. It is not in this amendment. What Schumer did is, instead of starting with the House bill and getting a vote from the senators on the House bill, he amended the House bill right up front and called for a vote on that amendment, got a floor vote for that amendment. What I want you to notice is he consulted a bunch of people. Now, based on the positions the people had taken or were taking, probably Bernie, Pat Leahy, also Ron Wyden and Ben Cardin, and probably Sherry Brown, and maybe Gary Peters, probably favored the inclusion of the minimum wage bill in, did not want it out. But there were senators here who would either be very skeptical about it or who would directly represent the real position of the administration and Joe Biden on this particular bill. In particular, Tom Carper, the senator from Delaware, is a creature of Joe Biden, a very close friend, of Joe Biden. Was one of those who replaced him in the Senate, was supported by Joe Biden in his candidacy for the Senate, in Maryland. Chris Coons, who doesn't get into this act until a little bit later, of course, was foursquare with Biden and Carper. What Biden wanted, they would want. Undoubtedly, Maria Cantwell, Debbie Stabenow, and most likely Menendez of New Jersey, all of them would be foursquare with Joe Biden, and probably Chuck Schumer too. So there were plenty of people consulted on this amendment who had input into the amendment that could have been representing what the administration wanted in the Senate bill. Now, what did the administration want in the Senate bill in the form of an amendment to the House bill? I think that what they were looking for was a bill that would not raise the issue of the parliamentarian in such a way that Kamala Harris would have to decide that issue. They were trying to fix it so that there would not be a point of order on the minimum wage bill that Harris would have to decide. The White House wanted an amendment which already eliminated the minimum wage bill, so it wouldn't have come up. And it had plenty of people in consultation with Schumer to represent that particular point of view and to drown out any contrary positions, such as Bernie Sanders's position. Now, I wondered a few days back why Bernie had to introduce an amendment to try to get the mini wage back into the bill. The answer is here. Because the first action that was taken in the Senate was to write the mini wage out of the bill without even giving it a vote. That's why Bernie had to introduce an amendment. Before the Senate even acted, Bernie knew he was going to have to introduce an amendment to get back in what had been in when it came over from the House. So I wanted to make that point, And I wanted to point out that the reason why things happened that way was so Biden could avoid the situation where Kamala Harris would have to be on the line. So that's why Bernie was put on the spot to have an amendment to get it back into the bill. So this led to the following chain of events, of course. The first amendment to the bill, other than this amendment, which was passed by the Democrats, but the next amendment, that is the amendment to the new Senate bill that just had been passed, the first amendment to be considered was Bernie's amendment. It was kept open for a long time, and it was also debated for some time. But what happened was there was a procedural vote on that particular amendment. And what the procedural vote was about was, it was a vote to see whether the amendment would get a floor vote in the Senate. And what the amendment was about was adding the minimum wage provision from the House back into the Senate bill. And the result of that is described in this article from Common Dreams that I'll share with you now, and you probably know the result. Here are the 8 Democrats who just joined GOP to vote down Sanders' $15 minimum wage amendment. This was by Jake Johnson on Friday. There's Joe Manchin having a nice, friendly conversation with a Republican and John Tester. And then Bernie Sanders' last-ditch effort to reattach a $15 an hour minimum wage provision to the Senate coronavirus relief package failed Friday morning after 8 members of the Democratic caucus joined all 50 Republicans in voting down the Vermont senator's amendment. But why were they able to do that? To vote down the amendment by voting down whether it would even get a floor vote? Because Bernie did not object straight up and tell people, you lose my vote for this bill if you replace the minimum wage bill. Anyway, those who voted against advancing Sanders' amendment, and why was Sanders advancing the amendment? He was advancing the amendment not because he really expected to win it. He was advancing the amendment because he was trying to get those who opposed it on the record as opposing the minimum wage himself. He was not fully successful in that. Had he objected to the First Amendment and been willing to vote alongside the Republicans on that First Amendment by Schumer, that First Amendment would never have passed, and the Senate would have been stuck with the House's bill until they got Bernie's agreement. So Bernie put himself in the situation of having to advance an amendment himself. Those who voted against what he wanted to do in the procedural vote were 8 senators. Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, not a surprise, of course, Angus King, independent of Maine, Tom Carper, of Delaware, Chris Coons of Delaware, John Tester, Montana, Jeanne Shaheen, New Hampshire, and Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire. It's important who these people were. It is not right to conclude that they're all against a minimum wage bill to get to $15 an hour, that they would all necessarily be against a House bill in different circumstances. The reason why is the motivation of all 8 of them to vote against the procedural bill was probably in part to protect Joe Biden, Joe Manchin, and Kyrsten Sinema from getting into a situation where they would have to be recorded as directly voting against the $15 an hour minimum wage provision. It's important to see that. They're trying to cover each other. Now, why would Biden be interested in covering the opposition? Because from Biden's point of view, even if he favors the minimum wage, and he may still at some level favor a minimum wage, favor keeping his own promise sometime over the next 2 years. But right now, he was not in favor of having a fight over that. He was in favor of getting his big bill, his relief bill, through the Senate with a minimum of conflict without risking defeat in as short a time as possible. So he was able to deliver on everything that was in that bill, or on most everything that was in that bill, except for the minimum wage. And the course of least the muss and fuss was the course of going along with Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, protecting them from taking a tough vote, which included seeing to it that they were not alone in taking the procedural vote. So believe me, Tom Carper and Chris Coons would never vote except for what Joe Biden wanted. It's as if there were 2 Joe Bidens voting on this bill in the Senate. Tom Carper and Chris Coons are alter egos of Joe Biden. And Jeanne Shaheen is pretty close to Joe Biden, too. There are at least 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 of those people who were tied to Joe Biden in various ways. Remember, a lot of them worked with Joe Biden when he was the vice president. Some of them were successors to Joe Biden. They're all in the Biden wing of the party, or they're centrists. They would know what Joe Biden wanted, which was to protect Harris and himself, and to protect also Manchin and Sinema from having too tough a time in their own states. by taking on the burden of voting against the minimum wage, straight up. Now, Crystal Ball declares, of course, every single Dem who voted against a $15 an hour minimum wage should be primaried, she said. But they did not directly vote against the minimum wage. They voted against a floor vote on the minimum wage being taken up. They can all straightforwardly deny and said, look, I didn't think the minimum wage bill would pass the Senate because I thought at least one person was going to defect. And I wanted this bill to pass. It was very important for the American people for this relief bill to pass. Now, sure, it's very important for a mini wage bill to pass too. But there'll be lots of other opportunities to pass a mini wage bill. But right now, people need protection against eviction. They need their unemployment payments to be continued. They need the direct payments. They need all the other goodies in this bill, the coronavirus goodies, the money for school, the state and local government money, and they need all that stuff now. So we're telling you it was perfectly reasonable to block a floor vote on the minimum wage in order to get that back into the bill, which would then force one of the opponents of the minimum wage to vote against it and tank the whole bill. They can excuse themselves by pointing out how risky it would have been to have done that. And it all be pretty reasonable. All be pretty reasonable. Now, you can run ads against them, and the ads would have some validity, especially in the case of Manchin and Sinema. But my point is, the procedure as it went down in the Senate is a procedure that gives Manchin and Sinema and Biden and Harris fig leaves. It's about the fig leaves and the others being willing to be part of the protection racket. And before you condemn them too heavily, keep in mind that Bernie was a part of the protection racket too, because he never said to Schumer that if you take the minimum wage out of the bill with this amendment, I am voting against this amendment. And if it should succeed by some miracle, I'm voting against the resulting bill. Just call me Joe Manchin. I'm willing to do what Joe was willing to do. Bernie wasn't willing to do that. So he had his part in setting up this whole situation. Okay. I want you all to understand that. That's why I'm going through these particular details. So Bernie made a statement about it, one of his usual statements. And he's saying he's going to keep on bringing it up, and I'm sure he will. He's quite sincere about that. I believe there will be other opportunities to pass a minimum wage bill. But the White House enforced its views on the parliamentarian by getting the Senate to play this dodgeball so Harris would never have to rule on whether the minimum wage bill could have been included in the reconciliation bill. Now notice, this also creates the following situation. If the minimum wage bill gets through the House again in the second reconciliation bill that's coming up in 2 or 3 months, there'll be no ruling from the vice president about whether the minimum wage bill can be included in a reconciliation bill, because there would have been no decision by the presiding officer on that issue. So the freedom to rule in favor of including it in a reconciliation bill later is still there. We all must realize that that's a possibility for the future. So let's go on with this particular development. I hope you like how we're doing this. This is a teaching session. We're not going to make a bunch of facile pronouncements here. But we are telling the truth to the best of my ability of what I think happened. So, when the bill passed, what did Bernie say? He praised the passage of the COVID relief bill to address, quote, the myriad crises that we face. This is an article written today, by Andrea Germanis, a staff writer for Common Dreams. There were cheers in the chamber when the bill passed, of course. And Bernie Sanders said that the American Rescue Plan was, quote, the most significant piece of legislation to benefit working families in the modern history of this country. Even without the minimum wage in the bill, that's what Bernie said about it. Quote, this package, among many other things, increases direct payments by $1,400. And we have to notice it not only increases direct payments by $1,400, it's $1,400 for the children too, if you have any. It's not $500 extra per child. It's $1,400 extra per child. It's $5,600 for a family of 4. It extends unemployment benefits until September 6th. It reduces child poverty by half through the tax credits for children 0 to 6 and 6 to 17. In the case of 6 to 17, it's $250 a month per child. And in the case of 0 to 6, it's $300 a month per child. And the payments would be made in cash every month. $300, $250. That's a lot of additional money per month. To continue on with Bernie's quote, ensures we are vaccinating as many people as possible and puts us on a path to safely reopen schools, unquote, he said. Quote, the American people are hurting, unquote. And quote again, and this comprehensive plan goes a long way to addressing the myriad crises we face. The bill passed by a 50 to 49 vote. One of the Republican senators stayed home. So it didn't even have to rely on Harris's vote to break a tie, in the Senate. The vote was along party lines. Joe Manchin, as you know, gained some concessions. He managed to draw down the amount of unemployment protection people would get. Instead of covering the whole of September, it only covered until September 6th. Instead of it being applicable to all the unemployed, it is only applicable to unemployed with, I think the income limit is $75,000. So he got that. Also, he also got the $1,400 being sharply decreasing for people between 75K and 80,000, and 150 and 160,000. But for a couple, he got the shrinkage of the eligibility criteria. Okay, in other words, so he got a number of things to cut down on the benefits to people, like it somehow is going to help him, or it somehow is going to help the Democratic Party, or somehow help the American people to get less. But it made him feel good to get those things, that he could, play President Mansion for a while. So he got those things. But Biden got his $350 billion in aid to state and local governments. He got funding to launch community vaccination centers and increases in funds for Medicaid home-based care programs, and all the rest that we mentioned. He got a number of things too, and we'll go more into what he got. But the point is, there's really a lot of good stuff in here for people. We know the weaknesses. We know the things the Republicans are going to run on. We know the Democrats made ineligible people who got checks from Trump. Such a stupid thing for Manchin to impose on the party. Such a stupid thing. That's apart from not passing the minimum wage. Apart from it. So Barney Watson Coleman, a representative, of New Jersey, said, quote, "I'm frankly disgusted with some of my colleagues and question whether I can support this bill." She said, "What is the party of the people doing when instead of putting our full effort into helping struggling working families, we're arguing over ways to toss them aside? What are we here for if not to help the American people," unquote, she added. She tweeted this. Other provisions in the bill were touted by Democratic senators following Saturday's vote. Mark Warner said, "We get more vaccines into arms, help schools to reopen safely, and provide much-needed lifelines to the communities hardest hit by this virus." So, what Mark Warner was especially pleased about was working with his colleagues to add $70 billion to expand access to high-speed internet, which is a necessity, not a luxury. I believe he's right, during COVID-19. He really liked that. And Elizabeth Warren was very happy about the $50 billion in child care bailout that she had been fighting for with Senator Tina Smith since April. And the relief bill, she says, finally gets us there to help child care providers keep their doors open. Now we need to build a child care system that works for families. And also the bill that she had with by Senator Menendez of New Jersey to make any student loan forgiveness tax-free was included in the COVID relief bill. She says this clears the way for President Biden to hashtag cancel student debt without burdening the borrowers with thousands of dollars in unexpected taxes. That's something not many people have noted as being in this bill. That is very important if dickering with Biden produces significant relief for student loan debtors. Cory Booker had some things he was very happy about. Another round of direct cash payments, extending pandemic unemployment assistance. So evidently that's in this bill too. Not only conventional unemployment assistance, but pandemic unemployment assistance to gig workers as well. Extending protections for renters and homeowners, very, very important, of course, at this point. And he was very happy about the state and local funding and the school funding. Okay. So basically, that is my analysis of what went down and what was done to protect cinema, okay, and Joe Manchin, and to get this bill rather quickly through. Why did Bernie still like it so much? Well, he said why, but there's more on that from Ryan Grimm. Much more, okay, from Ryan Grimm at The Intercept. And I'm going to share that with you and see if we can get some new and interesting perspectives. More than $1 trillion of the pandemic relief bill is flying under the radar, says Ryan Grimm on March 5th. The relief package is going to bring eye-popping sums to some bank accounts. He says, only the Democratic Party could put together a $1.9 trillion relief package and manage to get on the wrong side of public opinion for being too cheap. Yet that's where we've arrived after 2 months of debating the party stimulus, with centrist Democrats chipping away at the benefit structure by phasing out individual checks at a faster rate and pushing to shrink unemployment benefits as well as shorten the length of time extra benefits are paid out. That's on top of the political mess created by Democrats who continued promising $2,000 checks even after the first $600 had gone out to people in December and January, that left people believing what they were told, that another $2,000 was on its way. The disappointment was unnecessary, created by Democrats placing their own artificial constraints on the bill and then negotiating among themselves within those constraints. They did it on unemployment too, with the Senate lowering the bonus pandemic benefit from $400 down to $300 in return for extending those benefits by a month and making the first $10,200 in unemployment tax-free. By the way, they didn't get a month's extension on it. It's over by September 6th. In the end, they only ended up getting a week's extension on it, thanks to Joe Manchin. Ryan goes on, but that disappointment may be blunted by other elements of the legislation that have gotten much less attention. Democrats haven't been messaging about what's in much of the bill. They're terrible at messaging. And Republicans have instead focused their ire on the estate of the late Dr. Seuss and on Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head, who now live under the single brand name of Potato Head. Mr. and Mrs. Head, contrary to Republican hysteria, have in fact retained their respective genders. Only the umbrella brand name was tweaked, says Ryan. As a result, more than $1 trillion from the rest of the package is going largely under the radar. He says the fluke in how the current policy was crafted in fits and starts spanning 2 administrations, 2 special elections, and a Senate takeover gave an unlikely boost to the left wing of the party when it came to the checks. For the past year, Bernie Sanders and Ed Markey have been arguing that adults and their children and other dependents should be getting the same amount of relief money. In the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, that's the CARES Act passed last March, adult dependents were cut out entirely. And while adults got $1,200, dependents got $500. That meant a family of 4 banked a check of $3,400. When Sanders and Josh Hawley successfully argued for the inclusion of $600 checks into the December relief package, the figure was small enough that Sanders was able to win the argument to equalize adults and dependents. Everybody would get a flat $600, meaning that a family of four would get $2,400. But then President Donald Trump, having sat out the negotiations, signaled that he would veto the package unless the figure was bumped to $2,000 and an assault on big tech was added to the bill. In the House, congressional progressives, led by AOC, quickly introduced an amendment to meet Trump's $2,000, increasing the payments to $1,400. The current legislation, which adopted the amendment, kept the formula the same, equalizing payments between adults and children. That means if the new bill is enacted, which of course it was today, a family of four would be on the receiving end of a one-time check worth $5,600. The money doesn't stop there. A new child tax credit, which would be implemented for just 1 year, but which Democrats aim to extend, offers $3,600 for every child under 6. That's the $300 a month I pointed to, and $3,000 for every non-adult child above that age. The aim is to have the IRS send out a check each month to families making less than $150,000. So that family of four above, if both kids are under 6, would get $600 each month if the IRS can administer the system effectively. If kids are older, it would be $500 per month. Over a year's time, that's an extra $6,000, folks, or an extra $7,200. I mean, the bill also includes billions in new subsidies for health care coverage, going to both Affordable Care Act plans and COBRA, a bailout of the child care industry, $50 billion for broadband upgrades, and billions toward full vaccination. In the House, of course, progressive Democrats are still fighting over the tightened eligibility for relief checks and resisting efforts to limit unemployment benefits. But so far, there's been no serious threat to block the package without the final set of demands being met, and Sanders himself is sending signals that he's comfortable with where it's headed. Asked Thursday about Joe Biden's tightened eligibility requirements for relief checks, he said to CNN, quote, "I think the main point is that we are doing something that is reasonably consistent with what we've done in the past," unquote. I don't know if I entirely agree with that, but there's no arguing with the fact that not only is this package nearly 3 times the size of the one Obama pushed through, but also it is much more fulsome than the CARES Act in actually delivering relief to people. It has no big provisions for business, bailouts for business, except, of course, the COBRA bailout, which is another bailout for the insurance companies. People could have been given protection, not by expanding COBRA, but by making Medicare available to people who needed COVID treatment. By enrolling them in Medicare, yes, that would have been lots cheaper and freed up money for more relief to people. But this bill still delivers an awful lot, even without the minimum wage in it. So the question is, should you get that aid to people now as quickly as possible by March 15th? Or should the House say, no, we're not going to be able to get a minimum wage passed except as an appendage to a reconciliation bill? We got to have it in this bill. We are not going to back off, and that's all there is to it. And of course, we covered some of that in Thursday's live stream. Let's now share the continuation of demands for the House progressives to wield their power and insist on the minimum wage bill being included in the reconciliation package. How can that be done? It's very simple. It's possible for a block of the progressives, so this is unambiguous. Let's say 15 to 20 of the progressives to tell Nancy the Senate bill, we will vote with the Republicans against it. It will not pass the House. The best thing which you can do for now is to call on the Senate to convene a conference committee and put us on the conference committee to negotiate on behalf of the House, because that's the only way you're going to get the relief package through. Now, if the progressives were to do that, as I said on Thursday, what would happen then is the progressives would get swamped by the media, condemned from here to eternity for standing in the way of aid to all these needy people on ideological grounds, for reasons of ideology. Of course, this is not ideology, not for reasons, of ideology. It's because the minimum wage of $15 an hour is so important to people, so important to them. It's very concrete for people making $7.25 an hour to get the kinds of raises in the minimum wage that were wrapped into the original House bill. These are gotta-haves for those people. They're worth thousands of dollars per year. They're worth the difference between $32,000 a year and $14,000 something per year. That's thousands of dollars a year for the poorest working people. That is a very big deal. It is not ideology. It is a very, very big deal. If they go for that, and they stand firm against all of Pelosi's threats, and all the mainstream media, and all the calumny that they're going to get, the leverage changes. As Dave Sirota and I made clear on Thursday night, the leverage then changes. To get this done, Nancy Pelosi's got to go to conference. The progressives can insist on appointments to the conference committee, because they can tell Pelosi, unless you put us on the conference committee and we are able to negotiate this compromise with our Senate counterparts, we're still not voting for the bill. We're not going to vote for a conference report either. And you're not going to be able to get it through. And the bill is going to fail. We're going to get a deal on the minimum wage. with the Senate people who do not want one. We're going to get a deal on that. They can explain to Pelosi whatever Harris said in the past. She has not made a ruling yet on whether the minimum wage can go into a reconciliation bill. If we hand her a conference report that includes it in the reconciliation bill, or some version of it inside of the reconciliation bill, she will be free to rule in our favor that it is in order. And that conference report will be able, at that point, to pass the Senate. And nobody will vote against it after we make a deal with the senators. And they can point out, surely both Bernie Sanders and Joe Manchin will be on the conference committee. And any deal that comes out of this would have to be endorsed by both Bernie and Joe Manchin, as well as ourselves. So we'll be able to make a deal, and there will be a bill at the end of this rainbow. Now, I'm not sure we can get it done by March 15th. But we can probably get it done pretty quickly if you act along with us. Now, will the progressives in the House have the guts to do that? I don't know. It takes a lot of guts because, as I've tried to make clear, this bill has a lot of very, very good things in it for people. And even though people who've been very much in favor of the minimum wage are saying, pointing to all the things against the minimum wage having another chance to pass in this particular session of Congress, we also have to point out all the other changes it is going to have. First of all, the campaign for the minimum wage can actually gain strength now because, for the moment, hopes for the bill to pass were blocked by Sinema and Manchin and some other Democrats. We can bring the heat for the minimum wage bill to them going forward over the next few months. We can build the heat and build the movement until it becomes unbearable for them. We can strengthen the campaign for the minimum wage. Bernie's not going to back off that, nor do the House Democrats have to back off that, even if they don't vote for the original House bill now. Even if they don't try to go to conference committee, they can still vote to build the fire under the minimum wage movement over the next few months. Of what value will that be? Well, notice the following. Okay, notice the following. There are a number of bills that must be passed. H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 must be passed. There are criminal justice reform bills that must be passed. There is the next reconciliation bill that must be worked on and must be passed. There are going to be tax bills that must be worked on and must be passed. These bills cannot all be subject to the filibuster. The filibuster is dangerous for these bills. It is unsustainable to keep allowing the filibuster, one senator wielding the filibuster, to be able to block things in a 50-50 Senate. That has to be stopped. Once the filibuster, is gotten rid of, and if you couple that with a movement for the minimum wage, you might be able to get some of the Republicans, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins maybe, to come over to the minimum wage side, at least to a degree, in the future. You might be able to get Sinema and Manchin to soften their stance. Certainly, it's in the interest of Biden and Harris to work on them over the next few months, because the Democrats, if they don't pass minimum wage expansion soon, it is going to weigh on them in the election of 2022. Even if they get H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 passed, which they can't do without getting rid of the filibuster, they still will have a disadvantage going into the election if they break their promise on the minimum wage. It is true to say they cannot break the promise on the minimum wage. But my point is, they haven't broken that promise yet, just because it was maneuvered by Biden to take it out of this bill. This was a Biden Manchin Sinema maneuver to get it out of this bill. Biden was for getting it out of this bill because he just wanted this thing passed. He just wanted to start getting some credit for delivering relief to the people. That was a very powerful motivation for him. People ask, what's going to be changed in the second reconciliation bill? I'll tell you what's going to be changed in the second reconciliation bill. People will have gotten quite a lot of the cash coming out of this reconciliation bill. It will have started to arrive. The economic needs will probably no longer be so urgent. The economy may be more fully recovered at that time. The situation will have changed, or at least the Biden-Harris administration can hope for that. And if it has improved, and if it has changed, they will have more time and more incentive to dicker with Sinema, and with Joe Manchin, and with other reluctant people. And this time, if their motivation is changed to go after a minimum wage bill and get it passed, which it may well be if it's included in a future reconciliation bill, if they have that time, then you look at that list of senators once again who voted against it. Carper and Coons, Angus King, the two New Hampshire senators, maybe even Tester. They go over to the other side, in part because we can build movements in their states. Some of them are coming up for re-election in 2022. They don't want to have people running against them because they voted against the minimum wage. They're not going to want that. So, it's a different political situation. And maybe even Sinema and Manchin are reluctant to vote against a minimum wage at that time. Plus, with H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 and other very important bills hanging fire and needing a 51 to 50 vote or a 50 to 49 vote because the Republicans won't support a thing, there's going to be a great incentive to get rid of or weaken the filibuster. And that brings us to the next piece. And now, I am not arguing. I'm not arguing here. Okay, I want to make clear. I'm not arguing that the progressives in the House should not put their foot down now. I think they should put their foot down now. Because just as Manchin had to demonstrate his power in the Senate to Biden and others, which he did demonstrate, that you have to consult me, and you have to conciliate with me, and you have to compromise with me. It's still up to the progressives in the House to demonstrate to Pelosi and to the leadership of the House that they must be at the table. And there is no better way to do that than to block this relief bill now and to get Pelosi to call for a conference report. I still think that is the best way to go. But in fairness, I have to point out that if people decide to go the other way, that doesn't mean that all is lost when it comes to the minimum wage. What it does mean is that at some point, these progressives are going to have to take a stand, and they're going to have to say, this is hardball. You don't get this bill through without us. You've got no Republican votes. You don't get this bill through without us. At some point, they have to be willing to say that. So, we move on to the next piece. The filibuster. This was written by Norm Orenstein, who's a longtime think tanker, writing for the Washington Post. He started out as vaguely right of center. He seems to have come over, as the years pass, into vaguely left of center. But whichever positioning he has, he's a very, very good analyst. Very, very good analyst. This is in reader-supported news. It's taken from the Washington Post on the 5th of March. And he points out that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are just opposed to getting rid of the filibuster, and so Democrats are stuck with it since they need all 50 votes in their caucus. And he doesn't think it's possible to completely bring over Manchin and Sinema to the other side. He notes that AOC has said that Manchin and Sinema stand in the way of progress, and that the No Excuses PAC is saying that they stand in the way of progress. Okay, and that the Democratic primary voters are going to be very, very angry if they continue supporting the filibuster. He points out, okay, that Manchin has fired back and said, quote, Jesus Christ, what don't you understand about never? He says the Democrats are right to see the urgency, talks about the voter suppression and the gerrymandering, and the Republicans with their 250 voter suppression bills out there. And the question, what can the Democrats do? He points the Democrats and advises they need to proceed with caution because it's possible for people to switch parties. And he points out that Senator Jim Jeffords, who used to be the Republican senator from Vermont, was getting harangued by Republicans because he would often vote along with Democrats. He warned them he would switch parties. He was in a 50-50 Senate. And the very next month it happened. He switched parties. Joe Manchin could decide to switch parties too. Now, I don't think that Joe Manchin would decide to switch parties. And I don't think he's in the same position, okay, as Jeffords. Because if Jeffords had wanted to run for the Senate again when his term was up, he could have done so as a Democrat in Vermont. By the way, that seat would not have opened up then for Bernie Sanders. It was the retirement of Jeffords that opened up that seat for Bernie Sanders. But Joe Manchin doesn't have to retire. But I shouldn't say that. Joe Manchin might have to retire because in West Virginia, I don't think Joe Manchin can win against a Trumpist if he doesn't have the Democratic Party behind him. If he chose to defect from the Democratic Party, he would be out in the cold. So I don't think he has the luxury of shifting parties. I think Sinema's in the same position, okay, in Arizona. A few years back, she could have gone over to the Republicans. But the Arizona Republican Party has been taken over by the Trumpists, just like the West Virginia Republican Party has been taken over by the Trumpists. Neither of them can switch parties. So I think they can really be squeezed. But there is still a point to Ornstein's comment. Who knows what angry and irrational senators will do? In other words, you're counting on their rationality when you think you can squeeze them into moving over. Maybe you can't totally squeeze them, but you can put pressure on them. That you can do. Ornstein says, instead of naming and shaming them, we might want to consider looking at what Manchin and Sinema like about the filibuster. Sinema recently said, if you take what she says at face value, of course, retaining the legislative filibuster is not meant to impede the things we want to get done. Rather, it's meant to protect what the Senate was designed to be. I believe the Senate has a responsibility to put politics aside and fully consider debate and reach compromise on legislative issues that will affect all Americans. And Manchin says the minority should have input. That's the whole purpose for the Senate. If you basically do away with the filibuster together for legislation, you won't have the Senate. You're a glorified House, and I will not do that. Well, I think those positions are ridiculous for various things we could talk about, but that would take up too much time. If you take their views at face value, the goal is to preserve some rights for the Senate minority with the aim of fostering compromise. The key then is to find ways not to eliminate the filibuster on legislation, but to reform it to fit that vision. Here are some options. Make the minority do the work. In other words, the filibuster reform of 1975, which moves the standard from 2/3 to 3/5 of the entire Senate for cloture. Before that change, if the Senate went around the clock, filibustering senators would have to be present in force. If, for example, only 75 senators showed up for a cloture vote, 50 of them could invoke cloture and move to a final vote. After the reform, only a few senators in the minority needed to be present to a request for unanimous consent and to keep the majority from closing debate by forcing a quorum call. The around-the-clock approach riveted the public, putting a genuine spotlight on the issue. Without it, the minority's delaying tactics go largely unnoticed, with little or no penalty for obstruction, and no requirement actually to debate the issue. So, thing one that can be done is make the minority do the work. If Republicans won't risk defeat to tell the truth, says Ornstein, Trump will own their party. He goes on to say, one way to restore the filibuster's original intent would be requiring at least 2/5 of the full Senate or 40 senators to keep debating instead of requiring 60 to end debate. The burden would fall to the minority, who'd have to be prepared for several votes, potentially over several days and nights, including weekends and all-night sessions, and if only once they could not muster 40, the equivalent of cloture, debate would end, making way for a vote on final passage of the bill in question. So, that is a very interesting proposal, which might well work to move bills like H.R. 1, H.R. 4, criminal justice, reform bills like the George Floyd bill through the Senate. Secondly, one could go back to the present and voting standard. A shift to 3/5 of the Senate present and voting, quote unquote, would simply require the minority to keep most of its senators, its members around the Senate when in session. If, for example, the issue in question were voting rights, a Senate deliberating on the floor 24 hours a day for several days would put a sharp spotlight on the issue, forcing Republicans to publicly justify opposition to legislation aimed at protecting the voting rights of the minorities. Weekend Senate sessions would cause Republicans up for re-election in 2022 to remain in Washington instead of freeing them to go home to campaign. In a 3/5 present and voting scenario, if only 80 senators showed up, only 48 votes would be needed to get the closure. Add to that a requirement that at all times a member of the minority party would have to be on the floor actually debating, and the burden would be even greater while delivering what Manchin and Sinema say they want, which is more debate. Then there's third thing that can be done: narrow the supermajority requirement. Following in the direction of the 1975 reform, which reduced to 2/3, 67 out of a full 100, to 3/5, 60 out of 100, and further reduced the threshold to 55 senators. Still a supermajority requirement, but a slimmer one. Democrats might have some ability to get 5 Republicans to support their desired outcomes on issues such as voting rights, universal background checks for gun purchases, or a path to citizenship, but for dreamers. A reduction to 55, if coupled with present and voting standard, would establish even more balance between the majority and the minority. Yes, why not implement all 3 of those? If, of course, Sinema and Manchin would go for that. In a 50-50 Senate, with the GOP strategy clearly being united opposition to almost all the priorities of Democrats, Biden and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer need the support of Manchin and Sinema on a daily basis. They won't be persuaded by pressure campaigns from the pressure campaigns from the progressive groups or from members of Congress, but they might consider the reforms that weaken the power of filibusters and give Democrats more leverage to enact their policies without pursuing the dead end, actually pursuing the dead end, of abolishing the rule altogether. The rule being Rule 22, the filibuster rule. So, when he says they won't be persuaded by pressure campaigns, from the progressive groups, or from members of Congress, I think we have to note that they may not be completely persuaded. They may not completely give in, but those pressure campaigns may be effective in getting them to agree on certain issues. They may be effective in getting them to agree to considerable trimming of the filibuster. How far that can go probably depends on the amount of pressure and the extent to which they exhibit a certain amount of reasonableness on the issue. And it may depend on the extent of pressure both from the progressive groups and from their publics and from other members of Congress who constantly point out to them that we're going to lose if H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 are not passed. And we're going to lose if something is not done concerning the minimum wage. It's just been too long since it's been raised. Something has to be done, and it has to be substantial. So there's room for movement. There's room for movement. We have to look at things in a more flexible way. We have to get them to bend. We can get them to bend, if not to break completely. And as we move forward and get more leverage with the things that we need, get the reconciliation bills and momentum built for a Green New Deal, we can probably get most of what we want actually passed, if we keep to it. But it would certainly help things if progressives could demonstrate their power in the House right now. That is a critical thing that can be done and that should be done right now. Okay, I hope to consider, another piece that's worth considering today, but there is no time. That's an article by Jeffrey Sachs concerning, could Biden be the most transformative president, in living memory? I don't know about that, but it's certainly a controversial question worth discussing, and I'll probably get to that when I come back on Tuesday. In the meantime, keep it in your mind. And now I will turn to your comments. So Johnny Garz is here. Hi, Johnny. Johnny says hi, Kay. Kay says hi, Johnny. Terry Cook says, World War III was planned before World War II. Did it work out in the same way? I don't think so. Steve Gonzo says, one-day record, almost 3 million doses reported in U.S. mass vaccination sites like FEMA-run centers plus stadiums may be boosting numbers. Terry Cook says, the pandemic has us in fear and panic. That is perfect for as long as things are peachy keen. Nothing progresses for the common man. Posted on February 12, 2021 by Terry. Know your enemy and what do they have done, are doing. The 5 general orders for all fighters against all forms of tyranny over the mind of man. Top Cat Plan, Citizens Committee for a Restructured Government, ccrg.info, go Ava US. And minimum wage should be $22.50 an hour. Actually, here in this group, Terry, we're for an average of $24 an hour, cost adjusted, either up or down, depending on cost of living in different areas of the United States. Kay says the elites want to keep us all poor, struggling, and afraid. Terry says that is their game of life and death. $2.5 trillion this year has been taken from our middle class to go to the elite. Go jnn.com, go ava.us, ccrg.info. Catherine Class says, at least we know the traders. Terry Cook says, the best battery is made of hemp, are coming to all stores, sizes, and ready to compete with Tesla Motors, which we must do to keep Tesla from being the dominators. We have a 7-to-1 highest paid, the Top Cat Plan, the Richard Romine Foundation economy. Terry Cook says, Henry Ford's Model T was famously made partly from hemp bioplastic and powered by hemp biofuel. Now, with battery-powered vehicles starting to replace those that use combustion engines, it has been found that hemp batteries perform 8 times better than lithium-ion batteries. Is there anything that this criminally underused plant cannot do? And he gives a link to boldbravemedia.com. Terry says, in the last 2 decades, many positive actions come about. We've arrived in a realm never before visited by humans. Caitlin Johnstone's energetic matrix, and Von Rietz's The Great Awakening. Jill Stein's, quote, The Broad Awakening at a Perfect Time, okay, and Agi Nost's, quote, The Open Source, quote, for all. Thank you for the references, Terry. And Kay says, I saw a post that Arizona already has a $12 minimum wage. I thought it was $12.15. It was 8 and change when I lived there a few years ago. Not sure if that's true, but something to think about, concerning cinema. Yes, I know it has a $12.50 an hour minimum wage. And by the way, I thought I read that it was slated to go to $15 an hour there in 2 or 3 years itself at the state level in Arizona. I mean, I don't think cinema is going to be able to keep on trying to keep it down, okay, at a national level. That's not good for Arizona industries competing with industries in other states. In other words, she's got to level the playing field, okay, for Arizona. If the minimum wage is $12.15 in Arizona now, Kirsten Sinema should be for raising the minimum wage in the country at large instantly to $12.15 now. Instead, she's opposing a bill that only lifts it to $9.50 now. What kind of sense does that make? Terry says, know the power of your brain and what can happen when combining with many other minds. Terry says, if we do plant hemp, this is Terry Cook, not Terry Burke, in massive amounts, we will see 1/2 of humanity If we do not plant hemp in massive amounts, we'll see 1/2 of humanity perish within a single decade. I'm all for planting lots and lots of hemp. From what I can see, that doesn't have a downside. Kay says, Terry, my old daddy told me many years ago that if you can read, you can teach yourself anything you want to know. He was right. Terry Cook, producing and supplying green energy is a challenge, and we pack the gear to do it, both commercial and at home in your garage, hydrogen. Terry Burke says, why aren't they a bit loyal to the people as they are to caveman? Shake my head. They take their marching orders from caveman. They hope to be caveman one day. If Joe Biden had to wait until he was, how old is he now? 77, 78, in order to become the president of the United States, they probably figure maybe they can become the president of the United States when they're 77 or 78. Especially Chris Coons, he's comparatively young. Terry Cook says, on March 20th, Facebook user Barbara Hendrickson posted a graphic claiming that the House voted no for senior citizens getting an extra $335 per year. They voted to give themselves an extra $8,000 a month. Huh? No, they didn't vote to give themselves an extra $8,000 a month. The House didn't vote for that. When did they vote for that? $8,000 a month is $96,000 a year, Terry. Get real. No Congress people ever voted for that kind of raise for themselves. I mean, they might go $10,000 a year sometimes or something like that, but they'll never go $96,000 a year. Use a little common sense. I'm talking to Terry Cook now. Terry Cook says a similar post by user Michael R. Marriott read, stimulus package equals $1,200. Congress wants $25 million for raises. That's $46,700 each. Now who's thinking of you? The post has more than 64,000 shares, more than 600 reactions, and more than 400 comments. $25 million for raises. Are you suggesting that's $25 million divided by 435 House representatives, Terry? Is that where you're getting $46,700 each? Are you getting that figure from there? Because remember, there are an awful lot of staff who work for the House. And if that 25 million figure for raises is correct, it's probably got to go to about 3,000 people, not to 435 people. So get real, Terry. Get real. Terry Cook, talking again to Terry Cook, says, we have maintained a 0.8 to 0.95% death rate for a couple decades. Now it is a little over 1%, so it is worth having our little business and poor people to lose so much and the greedy guts to have a heavy day. Being locked out makes people spiritually. Suicide is way up because when you lose the most important four-letter word in life or death, hope, that will bring on illness in every way, knock down with the efficiency of the immune system having you. Top Cat Plan, CRG.info have decades of seeking and finding the solutions to the question. John Nicholson says, free your mind conference video. What we do with those who poison our water, air, soil, and food, we take them out, not out for lunch. So do we find them and blow their head off? Nope. For one thing, you're not going to get in the bunker. We go total green. 80% of our paychecks go to energy of some kind. Who owns that energy? The Satan-worshipping child. Terry Cook says, homemade green hydrogen and cannabis are the two rocks in our Hempcrete Foundation. Terry Cook lists independentcongress.com. And Terry Burke says, all that is too long. I didn't read. Terry Burke says, GOP did point out all the sweetheart deals Schmuck and Schmancy tried to smuggle in the bill. Yes, they probably did. They're all about the sweetheart deals. They are. Terry Cook says, I wish to report the biggest rape of the American citizens since making cannabis illegal in 1937. I'm calling out all in Congress who voted to give 43,000 millionaires and 465 billionaires 1.6 million green hemp paper Federal Reserve notes. What are you talking about, Terry? Our lawsuit to make things right include having all who are a part in that vote to enforce all recipients of the 1.6 million pay it back with interest. Any congressmen who refused and were among those instrumental in the first stimulus package for the 1%. In 6 months, 2021, the military road stops will commence. Get your shot or get on the bus. And Terry Burke says, here's some raid. Be gone, loon. Terry Cook says, we are hitching our wagons of circles to blaze a trail in unbefore visited territory, posted on December 27, 2020 by Terry. Again, do what you can to lift your vibration to love and gratitude and focus on the positive of what you'd like your new life world to look like, and be sending you extra positive energy, love, light, healing, and abundance. Peace, my brother in past lives. From our sister, the Reverend Sheila E. Johnson, our co-host at Chaos Crew Street. But Justice, Terry Burke says, tsk, tsk, tsk. Terry Cook says, electricity in Ohio is so dirty, the same electric car in California gets twice the mileage between charges than in Penn Progressive Independent News, Ohio. Terry Cook, this is my Christmas present to know this is being addressed. Posted on December 20th, 2020 by Terry, LBRY.TV, lawyer's petition for new anthrax investigation, show notes, MP3, Corbett report, David Meiswinkle, and Nick Harrison of the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry joined James to discuss their petition. Terry Burke, Terry Cook, now I'm going to bring out the sage to smudge you away. Terry Cook says, communication, education of truth. I'm sorry, I can't go through all of Terry's comments because they're just too much. Terry Cook says, why do you keep replying to me? Kay says, please listen and watch John Nicholson well. Where's that phone number for my voodoo priest? Terry Cook says, imagine to live as one, live in a land where all my brothers walk hand in hand. When John produced the special message of a song, Imagine, quote unquote. Johnny Garza says, seems like a UBI without the name UBI. I think they're setting us up for taking Social Security from us. Johnny Garza says, helicopter money. We need a job guarantee bill instead. We sure do need a job guarantee bill. And let's watch and see if that gets into the next reconciliation bill. Let's try to get it into the next reconciliation bill. It's perfect for that bill. And remember, Jared Bernstein is on the Council of Economic Advisors. He's the co-author of a book on the job guarantee. It's about the worst book that's been written on the job guarantees yet, but it's still about a job guarantee. So he might start to get us there. Terry Cook says we have the right fuels to propel us to catch up on all that is needed for a moral society. Terry Burke says, yes, that is the consensus among progressives, that the UBI is a trap, right? But the job guarantee is not a trap. Also, by the way, it's often the case that what they say is a UBI, is not a UBI. Johnny Garza says, we have to stop this corruption in our government or it will get worse and worse as the years go by, as we have seen. Yes, we do. The first step in stopping the corruption is insisting on honesty instead of lies from from the people we've elected to represent us. Every time that Biden lies, he needs to be called out. There needs to be a chorus of stop lying, stop lying. The same for Harris, the same for all the other elected officials who routinely lie, who won't directly tell us the truth. Terry says 1 acre of growing hemp produces more oxygen than a 25-acre forest. Cannabis is the king of clean, and Mary Jane is the queen of the attitude adjusters. And Steve says, Terry Cook is off her meds again. Okay, are you sure that Terry Cook is a lady, Steve Wolfbrand? I don't know that there's any indication of that. Johnny Garza says, we don't have the power to get a third party in our election process. I hope Nick is successful, and I'm trying my best to help, but I don't think they can overcome. Johnny Garza says, God bless them for trying, that's for sure. Steve Wolfbrand says, Terry Cook is off her meds again. Terry Burke says, the general strike is needed badly. I still have my yellow vest, but of course, the reason that our corrupt politicians don't give us things like a living wage is to keep us crippled at the mercy of corporations and industries. Striking would mean losing just about everything, not to forget the ass whoopings by the militarized police. And we don't even have M for A to go to the hospitals, doctors to get our eyes and arms replaced. And Rob Rivera says, hey, Yoda, how's it going? How you doing? I'm great. Yes, it's over. The same strategy with the new spin has proven insanity because nothing has changed. The public has received the memo that, quote, but progressive Democrats, unquote, not going to do anything. I've come to the conclusion that they either were liars that got exposed or they're being threatened in a similar way. A New York State legislator was threatened by Governor Cuomo. If the progressive Democrats don't have the courage like the New York legislator did, and Dolores says, Steve Wolfbrand, Terry is male. Terry Burke says, sounds like it's a successful formula. Dr. F. Steve Wolfbrand says, HR 1 kills third parties. Steve Wolfbrand said, are you gender phobic? Laugh out loud. HR 1 right now does kill third parties. Before it's passed, it has to be amended to make things fair for third parties. Terry Burke says, I did see the banishment of the filibustering in the news a few times today. Yeah, lots of people are talking it up. Even Amy Klobuchar is supposedly against the filibuster now. And Tina Smith, I think, is going along with her there, too. Evelina Ponce says, that's positive. Terry Burke says, but you mean we could finally buy Lysol and toilet paper again with the $1,400? And Terry Burke gives a link to the Common Dreams article. It has to go. Demand end filibuster intensifies the U.S. Senate. I think that was the article about Klobuchar. And Terry Burke says, open Smart News and read coronavirus variants driving another surge. Okay, driving another surge across Europe. Okay, I saw today that the Czech Republic is now negotiating with the Russians for the Sputnik 5 vaccine, because I take it they haven't been able to get shipments of the Pfizer or the Moderna or the Johnson & Johnson, okay, or the Oxford AstraZeneca, or maybe they don't trust, okay, the Oxford AstraZeneca. I don't know. But evidently they can get the Sputnik 5, who from all I've been hearing is probably pretty good. Terry Burke says, WAPO, surprising. And Kay says, the Senate is way more confusing than it should be, says Kay. And Steve Wolfbrand, it seems someone known as the parliamentarian actually runs the country, unelected, and lives in the shadows. Someone by the name of Elizabeth McDonough. Terry says, like under your bed. And under the bed, sorry. And Johnny Garza says, okay, folks, got to go to bed. Have to drive early tomorrow. Nice hearing Joe. It's been a while. Good night, all. Good night, Johnny. Nice hearing you, too. Or seeing your comments, anyway. Kay says, night, Johnny Garza. Kay says, laugh out loud, Biden. I doubt that. Steve Wolfbrand said, the squad doesn't have the guts to do what's necessary. See Jimmy Dore. Yeah, I've been watching Jimmy Dore. He's constantly attacking the squad because they don't have the guts to do what's necessary. Maybe one of these days they'll surprise you. We have to. Hope springs eternal. Kate says, I think North Carolina has already planted hemp on a large scale, not a large enough scale. Terry Cook says, green hemp paper, Federal Reserve notes are dollars. Yes, I know. Steve Wolfbrand says, not much of that is printed, though. It's mostly reserves, which are electronic dollars. Steve Wolfbrand says, the Steves used to run this channel. Now the Terrys have taken over. There are only 2 Terrys. There are still as many Steves. Though we haven't seen L. Stephen Day tonight. Steve Gonzo says, hemp also purifies the soil. Yes, it does. Terry Cook says, an independent Congress is the root as well as doing away with the 2-party system. And Terry says the most important and powerful 4-letter word, quote, hope, unquote. Yes. The urgency of hope. The absurdity of hope. Terry Burke says, getting sleepy. See you all on Taco Tuesday. I keep threatening you might see me before that, but I've lately had a bunch of things to do. Frankly, I'm getting swamped, by information. Anyway, good night, everyone. I think we've about reached the end. I caught up to your comments. Thank you very much for coming. And thank you very much for contributing to the discussion. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend and a nice day on Monday if I don't get to you with some stuff. Okay. See you then. Bye. Terry says, L. Stephen Day did duck in for a brief time. Thank you, Terry. I didn't see Steve Day. Laura says, thank you. Good night. Kay says, thank you all. I love you all. We love you, Kay. And good night once again.